out with the Infinity Chaser's other deck. Well, not other deck, but the Infinity Chaser's other archetype from the pack. It's one of my other favorites from there. It is the Witchcrafters. I get a very Harry Potter feel style from this, but we're gonna go ahead and start this off and hopefully have enough light for this. But yeah. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and start this out with 3 Witchcrafter Schmiedas from the deck. Pretty much with all these girls, they all have this little effect upon their normal summoning. During your main phase, it's a quick effect. You can tribute this card, then you can discard 1 spell card. It's a special summon 1 Witchcrafter monster from your deck, except Witchcrafter Schmieda. You can banish this card from the graveyard to send 1 Witchcrafter card from your deck to the graveyard, except for Witchcrafter Schmieda. And you can only use each of her effects once per turn. So pretty much, yeah, she's like a Rhoda for the deck, almost, I would think, because you can search out any Witchcrafter to special summon. Her graveyard effect is really good because you can just pitch a spell card from the deck to the graveyard. Well, not just a spell card, but any Witchcrafter card. You mainly want to target your spells if you need them. But we'll get to that like later on once we hit the spell cards. Next up for the decks, these are the one-ofs that I run for the big girls. 1 Witchcrafter Heine, 1 Witchcrafter Madame Vier, and 1 Witchcrafter Edel. With Witchcrafter Heine, your opponent cannot target other spellcaster monsters you control with card effects, and she has a quick effect that you can discard 1 spell card, then target 1 face-up card your opponent controls and destroy it. You can only use each effect of Witchcrafter Heine once per turn. The most I would run out of her in any deck build with this deck, I would only run like 2 copies of Witchcrafter Heine. Any other than that, I can't imagine it being really. I could imagine it being kind of bricky. Then we have our Madame Vier. During damage calculation, if a spellcaster monster battles an opponent's monster, quick effect, you can reveal any number of spells with different names in your hand, and if you do, your battling monster gains 1,000 attack and defense for each revealed until the end of this turn. And then you can chain into this quick effect. You can discard 1 spell card, negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn. You can only use each effect of Witchcrafter Madame Vier once per turn. Now, she's really good, but again, she's kind of a bigger monster with only 1,000 attack and 2,800 defense. I would honestly only run her at 1 in the deck just because of that fact that she's not that great with attack-wise, but I mean, she has a really good defense and a really great effect, but she still would only sit at 1 in my build, and in any build that I would recommend playing. Edel, quick effect, you can discard 1 spell card to special summon 1 Witchcrafter monster from your hand, except for Witchcrafter Edel, and then you can tribute this card to target 1 spellcaster monster in your graveyard, except for Witchcrafter Edel to special summon it. She is decent. She's not a key important factor of the deck, so she can be played in the deck, or she can be played without it, regardless. That really won't hurt the deck if you run her or you don't run her. I think the best monster that's coming out for the Witchcrafters will be their hand trap, but that won't be until mid-August when Rising Rampage drops. We're going to keep going with this, though. I run 2 copies of Witchcrafter Pitor and Witchcrafter Pottery. With Pottery, during your main phase, you can quick effect and you contribute this card to discard 1 spell card. You can special summon 1 Witchcrafter monster from your deck, except for Witchcrafter Pitor. Pottery. If you have no cards in your hand, you can banish this card from your graveyard. Then you can target 1 Witchcrafter card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. So, with all of them, they all have the same first effects to where you can summon them, tribute them, then discard a spell to special summon another Witchcrafter monster from your deck. But they all have each individual different graveyard effects. She is a good card in the deck. She's really great, especially if you have stuff in your graveyard that you can't recur back off of their own effects, and you can just add it right back to your hand that turn. but it only works if you have no cards in your hand at all for her effect to go off. Pittore, during the main phase, she does the same thing. If she's in your graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then draw one card, and send one Witchcrafter. Honestly, you don't want to use her effect unless you have another Witchcrafter card in your hand, because if you don't, you lose your entire hand. Little fun fact with these, they all have different, their names all translate out to something different. Witchcrafter Schmiede is obviously German, and it translates out to blacksmith, and Pittore is, I do believe, Italian for painter, and pottery is another one for potter, and I'm pretty sure Edel has something to do with I can't exactly remember what Edel is for, but it's not that important. Their names are all just something. Anyways, back to the profiling. I run 2 effect veilers because, yeah, it's effect veiler. It's still one of the best hand traps, just to stop your opponent's monster effects. I run 2 Droll and Lockbirds in the deck just to stop your opponent from adding cards to their hand except by drawing, so, it works out great. Yeah. That's it for the monster lineup. Now we're going to go into the spells. This is a pretty spell-heavy deck just due to the fact that they all require them to pitch spell effects or spell cards to gain their special summoning effects. But this is my control variant of the deck. I run 3 copies of Secret Village of the Spellcasters. This card right here, so good. Especially if you already start your board out with spellcasters on the field. You can literally lock your opponent out of doing things, because if you control a spellcaster monster and they don't, they can no longer activate spell cards, so, it'll lock them out. But if you don't control any spellcasters, then you're no longer allowed to activate spells, so you always want to make sure you have a spellcaster on the board before playing that card, because you can really screw yourself over. I run 2 copies of Magician's Left Hand in the deck just to stop those first effects of traps, because why not say no to spells and no to your opponent's trap cards? But this is also a decent side deck card, because not a lot of decks out there besides Altergeist run trap cards, so with that being said, obviously, since Altergeist are spellcasters, you don't want to main deck your Secret Village of spellcasters just due to the fact that they'll still be able to activate spell cards because of them being spellcasters. So that's why you would want to run your left hands and your right hands, because at least then you'll be able to get your negations. Then I run 2 terraformings in my deck. Obviously enough said due to the fact that I run 3 Secret Village of spellcasters, and I want to see that as soon as possible so I can start my board and get my plays off. I run 2 Witchcrafter by Streets. Now, this card is really good for the deck. The first time each Witchcrafter monster you control would be destroyed each turn by battle or card effect. It is not destroyed. You can only use one of the following effects of Witchcrafter by Streets once per turn. If a Witchcrafter monster you control would discard to activate an effect, you can send this card from the field to the graveyard instead. And then during the end phase, if you control a Witchcrafter monster, you can take this card from your graveyard and set it back on the field. But that's if you don't use the first effect to discard. But yeah, I always run 2 copies of these just because of the effect of it. Then we run currently 2 creations. I want to bump this up to 3 just because I want to see this as soon as I can, because it literally searches out every single Witchcrafter monster in the deck, and I need to see them as soon as possible. They also have Also, all the spell cards of the Witchcrafters have this neat little secondary effect that if you control a Witchcrafter monster, that these cards come back to your hand at the end of the turn if you didn't use them already. So if you activate a Witchcrafter monster and you have one of these in your hand and you pitch it out to the graveyard to get your special summon searches, uh, this will come back to your hand at the end of the turn. Since you did not activate it, you're only using it for the effect of your Witchcrafter monster. So you'll always end up getting your Witchcrafter spells back to your hand, which is really neat. Unless it's like Buy Street or Scroll, because they will come back to the hand. Foolish Burial of Goods is another really good card for this deck because you can activate it to send off like any of your Witchcrafter spell cards, really, and just get them back to your hand at the end of the turn if you control Witchcrafter monsters. So getting this card is really good to like send out cards from your deck to the grave that you need because you know that you'll be able to get it back. I run one of those. I would like to at least have 3 copies of that in the deck just because it's great. Reasoning. Really great, especially if your opponent doesn't know what you're playing, because they can guess whatever level of monsters, and if they guess it wrong, which, again, if they don't know what you're playing, they'll more than likely guess it wrong, because the levels of the Witchcrafters vary between, like, I can't really remember what their levels are off the top of my head right now, but you'll always get your special summon, and then you can get your normal summon on top of that. So it's really important that you want to go first with this deck just to set up your board so your opponent doesn't know what you're playing, and then use this card. Hopefully, if you get it into your hand, so you can get your special summon off and then a normal summon. Then I run one Witchcrafter Holiday. I would love to have this card at least 2. It is the Monster Reborn of the deck. And again, like I said earlier with the other Witchcrafter cards, they all have that same effect that if you don't activate them and you just pitch them, they all have that same effect to come back to the hand as long as you control a Witchcrafter monster on the field. I run one Metaphose Fusion because great target for Foolish Burial Goods, or just that discard to send to the graveyard, activate effect to shuffle into the deck and get a draw 1. So why not? It's great. Just for that simple fact. That's the only reason that I run this card at all, is just for the draw effect from the graveyard. Next up I do one Witchcrafter Draping. It's a great card. It just bounces your your opponent's spell or trap cards back to the hand up to the number of Witchcrafter monsters that you control on your board. It's a decent card. I only would run it at 1 just because it seems cloggy at 2, because like you're always going to see these cards regardless of what, because, yeah. One copy of Witchcrafter Scroll. With this card, if it's on the field once per turn during the battle step, if your spellcaster monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can draw 1 card, and then it has the same effects at the same bottom 2 effects as Buy Street. That this card can be used as the discard for a Witchcrafter monster, and it also returns to the spell and trap card zone if you didn't use either one of the effects, as long as you control a Witchcrafter monster. Then we're gonna go with one Magical Mallet, because if you have a bad hand and you draw into this, you can just activate this and then literally just shuffle whatever cards back into the deck and draw the same amount of cards and hopefully unbrick yourself. It's a better version of card destruction. One Monster Reborn in the deck, because for obvious reasons, it's a Monster Reborn. You can get back cards from either player's graveyard for that reason, just for different plays. We do one Witchcrafter Collaboration. This card, you can target one Witchcrafter monster that you control, and they can make up to 2 attacks during the battle step, which is nice. And again, it'll come back to your hand if you just discard it and you don't activate its effect. One Magician's Right Hand. Like I said earlier, for those Altergeist matchups, if you don't want them activating any spells or something like that, well, actually, this really wouldn't matter to with Altergeist, because they don't really have any spells. They're mainly trap-heavy decks, so I would soup up on the left hands. But right hand's still a good card, just for that simple fact, if you don't have Secret Village on the field, at least you'll have this to stop the first activation of a spell card and destroy it. That's it for the spell lineup. Like I said, this deck's really, really spell heavy just for the simple fact of their effects being needed for spell cards. For our trap cards, since this is a control variant and kind of a stun build, I run 3 copies of Cursed Seal the Forbidden Spells. Again, the discarding the spells from my hand will not matter to me because I will see them again at the end of the turn for the cost of this because like I said, if I control those Witchcrafters, they'll come back to my hand. Cursed Seal the Forbidden Spell, honestly, is really great for certain matchups, especially against the Sky Strikers. If you play this card at the right time and you hit their Mobilize, Engage, their Multi-Roller, or like Hornet Drones or something like that, they can no longer, those cards can't be used anymore in the duel, and that really just shuts them down completely because those are the main cards I do believe that they rely on in the Sky Striker deck. Same for like Salamangrates. If you hit like Sanctuary, they don't get that anymore, and most of the time they run only 1 copy of Sanctuary, so that won't really matter. But I mean, they wouldn't be able to recur it back and activate it anymore. You could hit their circle, so they don't have any other way. So it just like limits their ways of searching. They don't have that many ways of searching. You can hit their Fusion of Fire, so they won't get their Violet Chimera for their OTK variant if that's the kind of build that they're running. But you just always want to hit their more important spells and their spells in that deck, so you can stop the plays. We also do 3 copies of Summon Limit because you want to limit your opponent from summoning out as many monsters as possible, because most of the time if you're going up today's matchups, most people are going to be special summoning and try to make big boards, and with Summon Limit you can at least stop some of their board making. Yeah, it'll kind of hurt you a little bit, but like not so much because you don't really excuse me. You don't really do a lot of special summoning in the Witchcrafter deck that much, so it's not really going to hurt you too bad, but it will hurt your opponents depending on what decks they're playing, so Summon Limit could really do some major damage. And last but not least, I run 1 copy of Broken Line, just for that. When a spell or trap card or monster effect is activated in this card's column, and while this card is set, negate the activation, and if you do, you can destroy that card. So it's pretty much like a dumbed down, I guess, Infinite Impermanence, I guess you could say, because it bases itself off of columns, but it's not that great. I mean, it is good, but it's not as good as Infinite Impermanence. If I had Impermanence, I would definitely run that, but for now, I guess I'll just play the Broken Line for now. It works just as good. I mean, it doesn't negate monster effects, but I mean, it will still stop whatever's in the column. But, that's it for my Witchcrafter deck. I don't really have much of an extra deck for this build anymore. I never really play this deck that often to worry about making an extra deck, and I don't really rely on all that much, since this is kind of a stun deck, and I hope to overpower them before I would even have to worry about getting into an extra deck. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I have for this deck. But I would really appreciate it if you would give this video a like, and you guys would subscribe to my page, and hopefully there'll be future videos uploaded of some gameplays, maybe some box openings for whatever. But yeah.